To produce a fossil requires, in most cases, especially for the larger kinds of organisms, requires complete burial and rapid burial. And that automatically speaks of catastrophic conditions. So the fact that we find so many fossils so well preserved, many of them with evidence that the animals were buried alive, is another powerful evidence for a flood cataclysm.
There's a lot of fossils in museums. In fact, the museums are full. They don't want any more fossils. The basements are full. Museums have collected 1 billion fossils. And scientists suggest that in the rocks, and you could find these, there are trillions of fossils. If you see an animal die along the side of the road, like a possum or a deer, pretty soon that deer or that possum is gone. The bones disintegrate, scavengers come, the mice eat the bones, the pelt falls apart. 10 years later, it's just dust. There's nothing. And yet there's these trillion fossils. Here's why we have a trillion fossils. There was this enormous flood. It was a worldwide flood. Tsunamis were racing across, bringing in sediment and quickly burying these animals. As the flood receded, all this ocean water percolated back through the sand that was covering the animals and provided the minerals to change the bones into fossils. And that's how you get trillions of fossils. You have to have a worldwide flood.
The one thing we frequently observe is that the fossils have been exquisitely preserved. What do I mean by that? Well, we find all the details preserved in place. For example, fish about to swallow another fish and it's been buried. That tells you it had to be very rapid to preserve those details. In another example, we've got ichthyosaurs, which are marine reptiles, some of these up to 6 feet long, and they've been buried in the process of giving birth to a baby. Another case of 10, 12 foot long fish with an undigested fish in its stomach. The details of wings of wasps.
The wings are open and the legs are in the flight position. What can we think about? They were flying. And those insects were trying to escape. They're trying to go somewhere, but they just got trapped with all the sediments of the waters of the flood, and that's why we can study them.
All these details require extremely rapid burial. It fits exactly with what the Bible says. It's consistent. The destruction of the flood was rapid, sudden, catastrophic on a global scale, preserving these creatures sometimes in life positions, caught in the action of doing something, and the details exquisitely preserved. That's consistent with the biblical record of the flood.
It may surprise you to learn that all of the rock layers of the world, the named rock layers like the Cambrian, the Jurassic, all of the layers of the world have saltwater creatures. Well, what greater proof would you need that this was from a worldwide flood, that there's saltwater creatures in all the layers? Now, this is in the middle of the continents. How did these saltwater creatures get here? It would have to be a flood. Now, the evolution scientists have to explain where these saltwater creatures came from, how they got there. You're saying, Mr. Evolution Scientist, that there's saltwater creatures in all these layers, and you're saying the oceans rose, covered the middle of the United States, and went back down, went back up, went back down, multiple times, at least a dozen times. Occam's razor would say, it's more simple to believe in one flood than more than a dozen worldwide floods.
It was in the 1980s that the secular geologists began to move to catastrophism and move away from uniformitarianism as soon as it suited their needs. They went to catastrophism when it served their purposes to help explain the extinction of the dinosaurs.
Noah's flood provides a better explanation for the demise of the dinosaurs than the impact in Yucatan, simply because that event is so small, so localized, there's no way it could have a physical effect that would cause the dinosaurs to be buried the way we find them. And nobody in the secular world even claims that. They say, well, it produced climate change that caused the dinosaurs to starve to death.
If you go on Wikipedia today and look up dinosaur extinction or Chicxulub crater, an asteroid sunk and hit the Earth, caused a global cooling because of all the dust in the air, and the dinosaurs died out at that time.
We have simulations where we've thrown the Chicxulub-sized meteorite on the Earth using high-performance computing, and then we get the subduction event, and we get the breakup of the lithosphere, and we start the earthquakes, we start the volcanoes. Actually, meteoritic impacts could have initiated that event.
But it has no power to explain the burial of these huge animals in the sediment record.
In the 1980s, secular scientists began to theorize that it was an asteroid that crashed into the Earth and wiped out nearly all of life on its surface. The theory posits that massive tsunamis and volcanic dust-filled air as a result of the impact are what destroyed the dinosaurs and most other life in a worldwide disaster. Secular scientists could not escape the fact that water and volcanism played a massive role in how life was once wiped out on Earth. But the Bible had already written that the Earth had been catastrophically destroyed through volcanism and water, and they didn't want to validate the Bible. So they came up with their own catastrophic version of events, i.e., the asteroid impact theory. You see, the Bible's book of Genesis had already made clear what happened in the past in detail, describing volcanic activity bursting open from the ocean floors, chronicling when the volcanic activity began and ceased, how long the rain poured, how high the waters reached, as well as giving the very reason why God judged and destroyed the world with the flood in the first place. You are essentially given two choices today. On the one hand, you have a book written thousands of years ago giving an amazingly detailed account of a worldwide flood that wiped out virtually all life on Earth. On the other hand, you have man-made theories, in this case, one that was only first postulated about 40 years ago due to the inadequacy of their prior non-catastrophic models that they know really didn't work. Both views require a catastrophic event with global implications, but only one has the power to actually explain the stratification of the Earth's surface and the trillions of fossils, along with cultures around the world citing a global flood in their historical writings and legends, while the other merely rearranges elements from the true account to concoct its own story. Think about it. The Bible already said long ago that the entire world's surface was destroyed catastrophically. They have no choice but to make that same claim. The Bible said that the continents were once together in the beginning. It looks like they have to share that too. Nearly all animal life on Earth was wiped out during the destruction, a fact that they also couldn't ignore. Marine life was scattered across the world. The Bible says the waters went above the highest mountains. Secular scientists formulated their own theories as to how to explain the marine fossils away. The Earth's original environment was permanently destroyed. The pre-flood paradise was gone. In the secular model, they refer to this as the prehistoric world going extinct. And let's not forget that the flood set the processes into motion for much of the world to be frozen over. Hot oceans produce evaporations and greater snowfall. Volcanoes send volumes of aerosols into the atmosphere, blocking the sun. Greater snowfall with cooler summers results in global ice sheets. Evolutionists have called these results of the flood the Ice Age. One of these is constantly being proven true as more and more evidence is discovered over time, while the other was only invented after the evidence was unearthed. And further still, contained within the Bible, is also the prediction that all of this would happen. In the second book of Peter, we are told that in the last days, which is the time fast approaching, unbelievers would be willingly ignorant of the flood, meaning that secular men and women would consciously choose to believe and create lies that allow them to push the catastrophic event into the distant past. so long ago and so far away it ceases to be scientific history and becomes scientific fantasy. The irony can only be described as biblical. The Bible makes it clear that the end times would be characterized by increasing unbelief of the biblical account of history and the flood event itself. Sadly, the religion of evolution is one in which its priests are constantly updating their outdated theories, while in the Bible, we are given the final, true, and unchanging account. And as the evidence is unearthed over time, the biblical account is always proven to be true.